Hi everyone, Al the Psych here. I have a short video for you today for informational purposes only that I've entitled No Suicide Safety Contract versus Crisis Response Plan for Suicide Prevention. I'm taking information from Psych Central, a book called The Practical Art of Suicide, CPR for Suicide, Science Direct, National Institutes of Health, and I think some others as well. So let's jump into this. So what is a no suicide safety contract? So a safety contract is basically a verbal and usually written agreement between the client and the therapist in which the client agrees not to engage in suicidal behavior. So basically the client is agreeing what not to do. Okay. So how effective is the no suicide safety contract? Well, from what I've been reading, it doesn't seem to be that effective. It might give the therapist maybe a bit of a false sense of security for his client, but again, from what I've been reading, it's probably not the most effective method when you're working with individuals that might be suicidal. So what is a crisis response plan? So a CRP is developed jointly by the client and by the therapist and has a few components to it in terms of what the client should do to increase the likelihood of preventing suicidal behavior. It's typically written on a card, all the steps, and laminated so it can be carried with you. The client can carry it all the time. And excuse me, the idea behind having a card is if you're starting to kind of get worked up, your limbic system's taking over cognitively, you're not thinking so clearly, you want to pull out the card because now you've got the steps right in front of you. Okay, you don't have to try and work through your emotional issues so much and think clearly when you've got the steps right there in front of you. Okay, so what are the components? Well, number one, precursors or triggers or warning signs, whatever you want to call them. So the client learns to identify what triggers lead to emotional crisis. Because you want to intervene as soon as you can. You want to catch it before it mushrooms into something big. So, for example, if I start to shake when I start to get anxious or irritable, if that's my first sign of what might lead me down the road to something that might be unmanageable, I want to intervene at that first indicator instead of letting the anxiety, in this case, the anxiety, escalate. Number two, implement self-regulation techniques. So what self-regulation techniques have proved to be effective at reducing the emotional concerns, for the client. Um, some people might be just walking or certain breathing patterns. There's a lot of, breathing patterns out there. Maybe visualizing calming scenes, remembering, I can remember that I've made it through tough times before. Things like that would be a way to self-regulate. Then three, actually reasons for living. What do I have in my life that gives me a sense of purpose, or maybe at least will give me a sense of purpose, in the future. Maybe it's my kids that still gives me a sense of purpose, or helping others, or work, whatever might fit the bill here. Number four, social support. People such as family or friends that help support me, when I'm getting upset. Now, if I don't have anyone, well, what about a pet? Sometimes just holding a pet can be pretty soothing. And, if I can't find anybody on this step, it just doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for the client, whatever, you move on to the next step and we'll talk about that. Now, I will say I'm over here in Orange County in Southern California, and there's what's called a warm line, and this provides non-crisis support by individuals that find that have dealt with mental health issues in the past. So that's a nice little option that's available over here. And finally, number 5 would be professional support. There's suicide hotline. In Orange County over here, you can call 988, and it's 24/7 service. Maybe you're going to contact somebody who's real good at calming you and talking you down, or like maybe your therapist, or maybe you're going to contact 911, or if you have to, you can go to the ER. So you can see how the steps work. It starts off at a certain level, and it kind of evolves from that point. Now the good news is that the CRP is very successful at reducing suicidal behavior. So in my estimation, this is something that is very useful to discuss with your therapist if you're a client. And even if you're not suicidal, the components that are here, I think, are very useful in many circumstances. Maybe you have precursors behaviors that don't necessarily lead to suicidal ideation or behaviors, but there's, still maybe lead to some pretty uncomfortable emotions and unfortunate behavior. So if you can intervene quickly with precursors, that can be very helpful. And when I worked in the school district and developed behavior support plans and behavior intervention plans, there was always like, what's the main issue? What's the problem? We knew what the problem was and we listed that, but it's like, okay, well, what's the precursor? Let's see that first. Let's intervene at that point first, instead of waiting for the actual behavior and in all its glory to show itself. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. There's a lot of information out there online if you want to dig in a little bit deeper. Okay, thanks.